Back again with you here on the 2D podcast. A football podcast is what it is, really, people. With us, as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com. He's got boots on the ground all over the training camps, but back home, I can tell, at his palatial estate in Kansas City as he returns from his latest trip to Baltimore. Just so happens Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus, PFF.com. He was in Baltimore as well. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB here in Kansas City. You can catch my work at 810WHB.com if you're not in the Kansas City area. A lot to get to tonight, gentlemen. Deshaun Watson facing an even longer penalty, I guess you would say, suspension. The NFL certainly wanting more. They want a full year. Roquan Smith, contract drama, wants a trade. Bears look like that is going to happen. We'll talk about that. No drama, though, with Kareem Hunt. No, we're not trading you. He's back in practice with Cleveland. The Chiefs have added Danny Shelton to the defensive line mix. What does that mean for them? That was a big point of emphasis for them going into the offseason. Many people thinking they didn't get as much done as they wanted. They added Carlos Dunlap. Now they add Danny Shelton. What does this mean? Stephen Ross, penalized, owner of the Dolphins, didn't stop the Dolphins and Bucs from practicing together, even though Stephen Ross was tampering with the Bucs quarterback and Tom Brady. Mitchell Trubisky said to be leading the quarterback battle in Pittsburgh. Cowboys offense, are they having problems because of their wide receiver situation? A little uncertainty there after shaking up the wide receiving core. The Lions on Hard Knocks. Jeff Chadiha's heart warmed by seeing his beloved Lions. He's all in. He likes the Lions in the Super Bowl. Probably not. I'll be honest with you. Ravens, both guys, as I mentioned, at the Baltimore camp. We're going to look at what to expect from the Baltimore Ravens. A lot to get to. We will move quickly tonight, guys. Let's start, Jeff, with you and Deshaun Watson facing a longer penalty. How does this play out? What's the next step? Is the NFL going to get done what they want to get done?
Well, it doesn't play out well for Deshaun Watson or the Cleveland Browns. I mean, I have mixed opinions about this. I understand there is the obligation to prove criminality here. And then there is the league's personal conduct policy, which does not have as high a burden of proof. And so I understand that he's in violation of that. I understand that he embarrassed the NFL. But I also believe that there has to be some level of fairness here. And when you look at two grand juries, I haven't looked at the evidence, and not moving forward. You look at what Sue Robinson wrote in her report about this not rising to the level of requiring the minimum 6-game suspension is related to violent behavior. You look at some point that stuff has to matter. At some point, you have to say, what's a fair penalty for Deshaun Watson? And I don't think the NFL cares about that. I think the NFL cares about making a statement. I think they care about trying to let people know that they're not going to tolerate this, which again is fine. But I think at the end of the day, it's somebody's life in career is affected by this. The Houston Texans played a role in this. They're not facing any real scrutiny from the NFL about it. And so where's it going to end up? It's going to end up not playing football this year. I think that's where it's going to end up. I think they want a year, and they're going to get a year from it.
Eric, your thoughts on where we sit with this one right now?
Yeah, I think Jeff brings up a lot of good points. The problem is the league sort of made their own bet in this situation in a lot of cases because, and Goodell has been the commissioner long enough where a lot of this is his stuff, right? Like, when
Yep.
Ray Rice, his thing came out, that was a 2-game suspension that they made indefinite. Ben Roethlisberger's was a 6-game suspension that became 4. There's precedent where I think somebody who is trying to be reasonable is going to basically say, hey, we can't give him a year based upon X, Y, and Z. But at the same time, I think the league is in a really tough spot, right? Because he sat for a year in Houston, but he was paid for it. And I think the Falcons, who are going to give him the key to the city, the Panthers, and the New Orleans Saints all deserve a fair amount of scrutiny for essentially, in my opinion, like giving the Cleveland Browns a little bit of like cover for this, right? If they were the only team, if Cleveland was the only team that gave him the time of day, then I think they would have a little bit more egg on their face, but they weren't. I mean, they were not the only team that gave him the time of day. And, the league sort of treated the 1 year that he sat out for Houston as sort of time served, even though that wasn't, an actual thing. Right. And so Houston deserves Houston deserves some issue, I would say negative publicity here, as does Goodell. Like, they never put Deshaun Watson on any sort of list last year. Like, it was sort of a handshake agreement that ultimately I think hung them out to dry in a situation like this.
I think the point that I would make is, like, if you're hearing Jeff and you're saying, well, 6 games, that's not enough. Ray Rice got a year. Deshaun Watson didn't play last year. That's the problem, is that last year this hung out there. He was paid last year, but he didn't play last year. Now, I think football players want to play. I think that is a penalty, right? But we know the pocketbook is the biggest way to send that message. And so, and I think everybody, I think the NFL too is, to Eric's point about the Browns trying to circumnavigate or helping Deshaun Watson circumnavigate any financial penalties by making this year's salary only $1 million. That irritates people. If it was a $30 million year for him on this $240 million contract, I think people would feel like 6 games was a little bit more. But knowing that he's only going to lose, $300,000 or $400,000, I think that sets people the wrong way. And the NFL is faced with the court of public opinion. Listen, it's really hard. I will say this. I'm happy to be critical of the commissioner. I think there are a lot of things they swing and miss on. But it's difficult to get this one right? Like, it's difficult to adjudicate the penalties and make everybody happy. It's just, there's always going to be somebody that's upset. I think the biggest thing is what Eric kind of got to, and you too, Jeff, the Texans. How they pay off the victims for basically harboring this activity, which there's no way you could not know. And if you don't know, I use this line all the time on my radio show. It's the old line from Casino, where Robert De Niro's character comes down to the idiot gaming commission's son-in-law, who's a boob and had the slot machines hacked for the 3rd or 4th time. And he's like, oh, I didn't know, Mr. Rothstein. I don't know. He's like, listen, either you're in on it or you're too stupid to know how to stop it. Either way, you're blanking fired. Okay, that's the Texans. I don't really care if you knew or not. You're either a moron for not having an idea of what was going on. Different masseuses come in time and time again, and nobody goes, hey, is something up here? Then you're penalized for being dumb, or you're in on it and you're penalized for being complicit with these activities. Like, to me, the biggest story, and I don't hear anybody talking about it other than us, the Houston Texans are the biggest story, in the NFL protecting its own in the ownership group, that they're not going to go after the Texans. I mean, Stephen Ross got it. Listen, they basically said it's significantly worse to try to talk about acquiring a quarterback that's already under contract than it is to harbor what is being considered by most predatory behavior towards women. That's a really bad look.
Well, and I think that this is a big issue. There are things that I know Jeff, and, basically everybody in this room knows about Houston. That is, everybody, like, anything you can think about the Texans is probably true, right? Anything that, you can dream up about them as far as, like, the organization and kind of how much of a frankly, like, a shit show they are. I think the league tolerating Houston acting in this way, right? Whether that be, like, just like the way that they run their team, the way that they operate, it's sort of like they're the crazy uncle of the NFL. And unfortunately, this is a league where it's not just Christmas and Easter, right? Like, this is a 365-day league, right? So yeah, I can tolerate my crazy uncle, a couple times a year and just sort of, like, make sure that you contain his weirdness. But, like, the Houston Texans are a full-time participant in this league. And the league and them being crazy as hell, and then the league sort of not, just kind of being like, okay, you're just here, right? Like, that's a problem, right? I think that's a problem because this kind of stuff happens. The fact is, Watson was like the Adam Schefter tweet, right? That comes out 12:10 a.m. for the degenerates like me every Sunday morning, Saturday night while you're betting on Wazoo versus UCLA. That tweet that comes out with all the players that are not going to play today, right? And it's like Kiki Kuti and like blah, blah, blah. All these guys are inactive. And they throw Deshaun Watson's name in the middle of that shit for basically the whole time, right? And it's like we're all sitting here just like it and it happened every single week and nothing happened.
Yeah.
Nothing happened.
Yeah.
And if they would have suspended him last year, right? Or they would have done something, right? When Adrian Peterson beat his kid with sticks, they put him on the commissioner exempt list. He sat out 15 games, and like whether or not you agree with him coming back, he came back the next year and played the whole season, right? He like never got suspended again, and they addressed it. The league took a stand and said this is wrong, right? And we, it makes the league look bad. Them not doing anything about Watson and Houston not doing anything about Watson is part of the reason we're here today. And it's as awkward as it is. And the league tolerating Houston's shenanigans for however long it is something that I don't think people address enough.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just want let me get a couple of the listeners in there. If you're catching us via the podcast later on, we stream live. Normally on Thursdays, we're about ready to get into our rhythm. We thought we were going to get into our rhythm, by the way, this week, where we were back with each podcast each week. But travel plans, I don't know if anybody's seen flights these days. Travel plans got in the way with Eric and Jeff traveling. So we'll get back to our Red, Gold, and Bold podcast every week starting next week. We promised it last week. I apologize. We'll be back with it next week. But we had a couple of folks here. If you're catching us via the stream, via Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, you can comment in the chat section. And Red says the initial 6-game suspension is ridiculous. Brady got 4 games for delaying footballs, and Ridley got a year for gambling. This has to be a minimum of 1 year. And I also like this one. Let's see. Where is it here? The owners need to police themselves. If they don't go after Washington, they're not going to go after anybody, right? Everything that's been going on with the Commanders. I think it speaks to the fact that the league is really not going to go after any of their own, right? And I think that's the frustration with the players. They got to where the commissioner can nominate somebody, an outside individual, to adjudicate it. That's what's going to go on here. But I think the players are kind of in the mindset, well, wait a minute, who's adjudicating what's going on with the owners? Like if these are the penalties that are being thrown around for us, it's chump change for what's going on with the owners. That's where the players have to take the stand. I mean, it's one thing to stomp your foot and shake your fist about how it's unfair. It's another thing to win collectively bargaining and creating your CBA, make it a real point of issue and not say, oh, when the owners go, oh, well, we'll back off and not take 2% away from your salary. Okay, we're good. Well, let's be honest. The players have given up. They could stand and fight and make that issue number one. Commissioner not in charge of penalties if they wanted to do it when they get to the collective bargaining agreement, but the players don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's a fair point to make. And it is not, it's kind of like abortion a little bit. It has become a big issue until it's getting taken away. The rights getting taken away. Then all of a sudden everybody is up in arms about it, at least on one side of it. And it doesn't drive elections until it becomes this kind of situation we have today. It's very much the same for the criminal conduct, the conduct policy in the NFL. And I think a lot of players think they're not going to fall afoul of the law or get into Roger Goodell's crosshairs in this way. And when they do, when it does happen to somebody, I don't know if they pay enough attention to it and understand the slippery slope you can get on here. And I'll throw Bob Kraft into this as well, with his conduct a few years ago in Florida, getting caught in a massage parlor and charges were dropped, it went away. But again, if the burden of proof is you just embarrassed the league, then he should be punished.
Yes.
Right? The same thing's happening with Deshaun Watson here. And to speak to the point that was just made about what Calvin Ridley got for gambling or what Tom Brady got for deflating footballs, evidence matters here. And what always bothers me when people talk about this is they want to compare the punishments as if there's not a different set of circumstances involved in it. If you take a PED, there's a test for that. They can determine if you did it. So they know what they want to punish you for. You know what the punishment should be for that. If you gamble, there's a way of knowing that you gambled. And it's been laid out that you're going to get a year's penalty or more if you do that. When it comes to this kind of stuff, it's a he said, she said type thing. And it's always hard to get to the root of it and get to the evidence of it. That's where I have the problem with it, because you have systems in place that are much better to do that than what the NFL can offer, and you're not really regarding them. You put an independent person in place to hear this case. She files a 15-page report about it, and then you go and say, well, that's not enough.
Yeah.
It should be,
I mean,
it should be higher. That to me is ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah.
And additional to that, right? It's the Houston not playing him thing, right?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
the
fine
Houston
him. If you want the
taking
money, just fine the guy.
Yeah. It's the Houston taking matters into their own. Again, it's one of those where this whole thing was so awkward because you had a star quarterback, a very good quarterback, not want to play for a dysfunctional franchise, and then getting accused of all these things, and then sitting a year where we're all like, okay, well, I guess, he's served his time. It's like, no, there was a different reason he was sitting out these games. And again, like the NFL just botching this entire thing. And now we have a situation where, Jeff's point, like it's just awkward, and the league doesn't have the tools in some ways to do, the league doesn't have the tools to do this, right? And ultimately, I think, the probability that Watson didn't do anything wrong is pretty low, right? You multiply the probabilities out, and it's like something bad happened, and but to Jeff's point, it's really difficult because you can't determine it. You can't like log into DraftKings and be like, Calvin Ridley placed a bet on his own team. That's pretty messed up, like it's tricky. But the league hasn't done itself favors by not putting together processes that are robust at all.
If they want these kind of things to go away, both sides need to collectively bargain what is an outside arbitrator who will decide what the penalties are for both players, management, and ownership. And none of them want. The money spigot keeps going. And as outraged as fans might act like, that there's still full stadiums and giant TV ratings. And until that changes, nothing will probably change on this front. Let's talk about the Dolphins and Bucs, because Stephen Ross was penalized. Jeff, let's start with you. Is that enough? What was given to Stephen Ross for really a multitude, or at least a couple, maybe that's a better way to put it, a couple of different transgressions against the league rules?
Yeah, look, I'm not the greatest when it comes to determining what a punishment should be for something like this, because it's a new world we're entering into, when owners are doing this kind of stuff, or at least getting busted for it. You have to assume it's happened before. But I thought taking a first round pick was a big deal. I thought, I don't know how much it matters not being able to be with your team if you're an owner. That seems like a little bit light. But unless you start talking about taking away $100 million from these guys, which is not going to happen, I don't know how you get deep enough into their pocketbooks. I think it's more symbolic than anything, that you're saying you're going to come out and you're going to say this person did something wrong. You're going to create a body of evidence that backs that up. And so I think it's more about the humiliation than it is about the actual numbers. But I'm glad they actually went in and found some stuff. I thought some of the things that Brian Flores was alleging were going to be hard to prove. But the stuff with the Tom Brady and the Sean Payton stuff, that's pretty sketchy stuff. It's just I think it's just sketchy stuff, and I think they got it right.
Yeah, they got it right, but we know this. The owners are never going to make the penalties really harsh, because once you agree to it, anytime you slip up, then you're going to be subject to those kind of penalties. That's what we've been talking about here for a long time when it comes to Daniel Snyder. It's really no different here. They're pissed. Hey, don't mess with our players, because if you take one of my good players, you get into my pocketbook. So he got slapped with draft picks. But as far as like a monetary penalty that any owner would ever feel, they're not going to do it. It speaks to the nature of how worried they are about their own behavior becoming exposed. At least 8 of them, right? Because for a vote, you've got to have, is it 27 or is it 25? I forget. Is it 75%, 20?
75%.
Yeah. Okay. So it's 24 of them. And that's what you've got to have to get it done. So we know that there's at least 8 guys that are like, no, we ain't doing those penalties. How much will this affect the Dolphins, Eric?
It's like from a football standpoint, it hurts, because this is a year where you figure out whether or not Tua is any good. Yep. And if he's not, you're stuck with a roster and no first round pick to take a quarterback, right? So like that's a pretty rough place to be in. it's tough for them. They lose a first round pick in a situation where they probably need one. I mean, I did you guys see everybody's showing the clips of Tua on air with no pads on throwing deep balls to Hill. I don't know. I saw Buddy throw a Tim Tebow like pass to a mound of nothing today, in a thing today. So I'm a little nervous for that team, right? Like I think Mike McDaniel, a lot of people like him, but this is a team where you have a new coach who's never been a head coach in the league. He's never been a play caller in the league, and he's trying to do both. You have a quarterback who's not very good. You're trying to elevate him, and I don't know. Like, I think that they're going to disappoint, and they're going to need a new quarterback, and they're not going to have the means to acquire one. And additionally, like, this pursuit of Brady, like, it's Tom Brady, so whatever, but it does show a lack of faith completely in the quarterback who they have. And also sort of one of those, like, hey, to the head coach, like, you're great and everything, but we wanted somebody else. So I just think it looks bad for them.
I'm all for the referendum on Tua, but the referendum on Tua is not the same. And guilty as charged. Yes, I have him on a dynasty football team. Okay.
Good for you, Soren. Way to stick your neck out there.
Don't worry about an addiction problem here. You may have to go to therapy over this thing.
It's okay. He backs up Patrick Mahomes, so I think I'm doing okay.
Look, when he comes to Kansas City, he'll look good in red and gold, as a backup to Pat.
Sure. But here's what I don't get, and I'm all fine with questioning him. Last year, he threw on the year what I think are some of the biggest indicators: 16 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. And everyone is ready to just bury the guy that he sucks. He's doomed. They have nothing. Yet a guy who threw 16 touchdowns and 13 INTs, they're about to give $250 million to. A guy who threw 16 touchdowns and 9 interceptions in Philadelphia is now being celebrated. He's the guy there.
Soren, back up.
And then everything is okay. Have you heard? It's all fixed in Indy because Matt Ryan and his 20 touchdowns and 12 INTs and 46 QBR, which is even less than Tua Tagovailoa's 50 QBR, are in town. I don't get the evaluation of Tua Tagovailoa. What is the hate for Tua Tagovailoa? Because I don't hear it for Matt Ryan. I don't hear it. There's some questions about Jalen Hurts. Right? There's definitely fire and brimstone around Lamar Jackson. I will grant you that. But what is it about Tua Tagovailoa that it's, oh my God, the Dolphins don't have a first round pick, and so does half the league's got a guy just like him.
Well, for one, by the way, I noticed Jeff taking a drink after you started comparing those.
Yeah, I need to
there's certainly something
let me
there.
just detach from this one.
Matt Ryan was literally traded. Right. The Falcons literally went after an alleged sex offender to replace him. So I don't think that Matt Ryan is regarded that highly anymore. I think people are like, oh, maybe if he kind of has a Phillip Rivers like year, this Colts team can win a horrible AFC South. Like, that's what I think people believe about Matt Ryan.
Let me say, Marcus Mariota is not a sex offender. He's talking about the Falcons' pursuit of Deshaun Watson.
Matt Ryan was traded to the Indianapolis Colts because he was pissed off that they went after Deshaun Watson.
Right? But Deshaun Watson's name never came up, and Marcus Mariota is a quarterback that's there. I wanted to be clear. You're not saying that about Marcus Mariota. I want to.
True. Right.
I want you to be
so Matt Ryan's not that well. Matt Ryan's not that well regarded right now.
Right. Okay. Well, I hear people saying it's all fixed, and I thought I heard the PFF forecast.
I like the Colts.
At the Commanders, which is, by the way, Eric Eager's podcast he does with George Cheruri for PFF.com. I thought I heard him dancing about with glee and laughter about what's going on with Carson Wentz in D.C. while talking about how stable it is in Indianapolis.
I said, Wentz has shown more in his career than Tua has.
That's the point, right?
Yeah, but it's Matt Ryan.
Matt Ryan has showed more in his career than Tua has.
Yes, back when he wasn't 50.
Again, the Miami Dolphins right now, with a new head coach and a new play caller and a quarterback that has shown us nothing at the NFL level relative to draft position and things like that, and an okay, not great offensive line, and a defense that lived off of turnovers, and a team that lived off of a bad schedule last year. You look at the teams they beat to get to 9 wins. It was like Ian Book quarterbacking the Saints, the Jets twice, the Patriots twice, and a Patriots team that didn't need to win that last game of the season, et cetera, et cetera. That team was more like a 6 or 7 win team. That team has a win total of 9. The Colts, I believe, have a win total of 10. So playing in an easier division, like I don't think these people regard the quarterbacks that you're describing that much more highly than they regard Tua. Like that's kind of my point. Is like Tua's being clumped into this group of like kind of mediocre quarterbacks when
I put him
I
in
guess
that
for
group.
me, like because I'll back up and talk about Hurts. If Hurts has a season the same as last year, the Eagles are not extending him, right? They are moving. They are playing out the contract and moving on, right?
Yeah, but I just
these
think
quarterbacks need to play great to get an extension.
I agree. I'm not saying any of them are stars. I'm simply saying that the narrative is Tua is trash, and people, you included, Eric, stop at nothing to point out that he can't really throw the ball. He can't do this. I'm simply saying he's no different than all these other guys, and nobody is like there's like a little car with a clown sweeping right at Tua's feet at every conversation that ever comes up about him. Yet, yeah, there are questions about other people, but he's already at the joke level, Jeff, isn't he?
Yeah, well, I think what hurts Tua, and I think is the same situation as Baker Mayfield had in Cleveland, is that he's a small quarterback who's supposed to really kill you with his accuracy and his arm, and he can't run in the same way that a Jalen Hurts can, or a Kyler Murray, or a Lamar Jackson. So when you begin to look at him, he's not like what scares you about Tua? Like every other young quarterback in this league who is either getting an extension or in a position to get one has a dimension to their game that can scare you. And I think that's what's always going to hurt him until he becomes Drew Brees is the best he can be, and he's not going to be Drew Brees. And so when people talk about him, it's hard to compare him to a Patrick Mahomes or a Justin Herbert or a Josh Allen, just because the only thing that he can really do is hurt you with his arm. And people are laughing about his arm now because of Tyreek Hill being there.
I like this from Gary. This is a great point. He said Tua was drafted one choice ahead of Herbert. That's killing him. And I think he's right. He's obviously a KC guy because then he made the point similar to McCole Hardman being taken before DK Metcalf. McCole Hardman's been a solid second-round pick, but he's not better than DK Metcalf, who's been a star, who was taken a little bit after him. And that's a little bit. Herbert's blown up, and Tua was taken in front of him. I think that is a big part of the rub there with him.
What's the best you think he can be? I mean, I think at his best, and Grant, he played in Alabama with, 5 guys who were drafted in the NFL. He's throwing the ball to first-round picks at receiver. You start taking that stuff away from him, maybe his best year could be what was Matt Ryan's worst year, that 20-12. I don't see him being a 30-touchdown, 5-interception guy in this league.
All right. By the way, I will offer Eric, I will take QBR as the defining rating, minimum 10 games each. I'll take Tua versus Matt Ryan.
I'll bet you a steak dinner that Matt Ryan has a better QBR than Tua.
Okay, I'll take it. You give me 2-1, right?
2-1?
Yeah.
He's not drunk tonight.
I'll lay 2 steak dinners. I like steak that much, so I'll lay 2 steak dinners to win 1.
All right, done. I've definitely got the dog in this one. I love that. That's a bet. By the way, I'll point this out. If you dig into the history of quarterbacks that played at Alabama that went on to play in the NFL, very few have had success. Maybe that's part of why Tua is being that way. Could be. I will point out Alabama, I believe, is one of only 2 colleges to have 3 different Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, along with Purdue. They were all very early. Art Starr, Joe Namath, Ken Stabler, but they do have 3 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. If you're wanting Purdue, it's Bob Greasy, or I guess in order it would be Len Dawson, Bob Greasy, and Drew Brees, the 3 Purdue quarterbacks. I don't think anybody else has more than that, do they? No college can have more than 3 different quarterbacks. Those 2 have 3. I assume that's it. All right. By the way, do you make anything of the Bucs and Dolphins joint practice after all the shenanigans? They can put aside their differences and go practice together, Jeff.
Well, this is I think it's players don't care about this. Tua may care about it, but Tom Brady's not thinking about it. The Bucs don't care about it. I think it's comical irony. But aside from that, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
All right. You got anything on it, Eric? You find it anything more than comedic?
I mean, this is just like the Illuminati, right? Like they're all just in it together.
All right. Let's talk about contract drama with Roquan Smith. The Bears have a new regime. It's not off to a good start. Eric, your reaction to Roquan Smith and wanting a trade, and some reports say that that's maybe progressing towards happening.
Well, I just, when you look at Eberflus comes from the Colts. You look at like the way that Darius Leonard, Shaquille Leonard, and Bobby Okereke played linebacker. It was very much a non-aggressive, passive retreat on play action, retreat on run plays, progressive defense. And you also look at Eberflus. It's kind of interesting, right? Because you look at where these guys come from. So Eberflus and Poles, they come from places that have bought into off-ball linebackers in Leonard, and then the Chiefs bought into Anthony Hitchens back in the day, which, back at the time, $9 million was a lot for an off-ball linebacker. And it's just, I think both men see like, oh, it's hard for a defense to have success when you pay off-ball linebackers. Like last year, right before the Fred Warner and Leonard deals, I tweeted out like a picture of the highest paid linebackers on Over the Cap, and there were no good defenses on the. You're talking about like Zach Cunningham. You're talking about C.J. Mosley. You're talking. It's sort of the running backs of the defense. Roquan Smith has been pretty good against the pass, even though he does bite on play action a lot. The Colts average 1.5 yards less per play action pass allowed, playing that style of retreating defense than the Bears did when Roquan Smith was on the field. Because he bit and stuff like that. He's also wasn't a great run defender last year, like a bad, like a below replacement level run defender, because the players in front of him were not particularly good. And, and just like a running back, when the offensive line isn't good, it's hard to win when you don't have that support. All of this is to say the Bears have the money. They have $18 million in cap space this year. They lead the league with $91 million in effective cap space next year. They have the money to buy Roquan Smith. It's just a question I think that Poles might have and Eberflus might have of can he change his stripes, right? Because Leonard and Okereke changed, they went from being like traditional aggressive linebackers to more that retreating style that Eberflus wants. Can Roquan Smith change his style? And then can he be effective? And if he is those two things, does it even matter, because the Bears don't have the supporting cast to support a player of that caliber? I think all of those things are going into the thought process. Do you want to take a humongous chunk of that $90 million that you have next year that you want to take to support your quarterback and put it in a position that isn't necessarily that valuable, especially if the league is, if there are teams on the cusp. So think about New England, think about Los Angeles Chargers, Denver Broncos. There are teams that are maybe on the cusp of playoffs that might be able to overpay for him, a la Seattle with Jamal Adams 2 years ago with the Jets. Where, I mean, if they offer you that much, you'd be an idiot not to take it.
The Bears are a long way away by my account, yes. Jeff. And so when Roquan Smith wants to get paid, if you've got an asset and you can get draft picks, and it even almost buys you even more, I think every franchise should see year one of a new regime as a total, restart. But I don't think this is a bad idea if he said, hey, I want top of the money, top of the position money. And they said, yeah, we're not that one piece away. No, we're not going to do it. This could just be not necessarily not valuing the player, just not valuing the position, as Eric said, and saying that we need to go a different direction, and draft picks are a better place for us anyway. And this may have been what they wanted the outcome to be to begin with.
I agree with that. And I think that Ryan Poles, being the first-year general manager, plays a role in this. I'm sure Roquan Smith, his agent, look at it as if, as Eric said, a lot of salary cap space, new guy in charge, playing a position in Chicago that's historic and iconic and all this stuff. The whole letter he wrote about wanting to be like Dick Butkus and Brian Urlacher and Singletary, all these guys. That's all fine and dandy. But at the end of the day, the Bears have a team that they're trying to rebuild. They have an offense that you look at the receivers, it's hilarious to look at what they're trying to put out around a young quarterback. And to go out and invest that kind of money in a talented linebacker with really good stats, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like trying to build a house and worrying about your swimming pool first. You want to take care of the brick and mortar stuff that's going to give you a solid foundation and give you something to live in and thrive in for a long period of time. And when you look at the linebacker position, I agree with Eric on this. This game has gone from 10, 15 years ago where those were the guys, the Ray Lewises, the Brian Urlachers, the guys you wanted to build around, the Zach Thomases in Miami, to now it's about edge. It's about edge rushers. It's about corners. You can throw safeties in there to a certain degree. And so the teams that are really good in this league, how many of them are putting out all-pro middle linebackers or all-pro off-ball linebackers, period? And I tell you what really hurts Roquan Smith's argument is Devondre Campbell in Green Bay. That you can go out and find a guy, plug him into your system, have him be a first-team all-pro, and he doesn't cost you very much money.
That's a big
well, and the other thing too, if you look at where Jeff brought up the Bears receiving core, the wide receiver market next year is not particularly good in free agency. You might need a first-round pick to get a good wide receiver in a trade. Yep. And so they have the money to sign these guys, but like the guys that are going to be available are going to be similar to like Sammy Watkins in 18 for the Chiefs. There's not going to be like a great wide receiver available. And as the position becomes more premium, it's going to become more like quarterback, where the only guys that are available actually via free agency are akin to Kirk Cousins and not akin to some of these great, quarterbacks, right? So if you're the Bears and and let's say Justin Fields is good, like let's say he plays well this year and they go 7-10 and they and you're like, you find out this year that he's actually pretty good. All we need to do is get him some help. Well, what does help look like? Help looks like a left tackle. Help looks like a wide receiver. Help looks like all these positions. You need a first-round pick to trade to a team and get that premium position. And so if Roquan Smith can be part of that equation, then it makes more sense than him subtracting from that the opportunity cost to have a pick like that to use and the money, frankly. Reports are that he wants like the number one linebacker contract. No. Like this isn't one of those. This is a very Orlando Brownish situation where he's going to want that top end, and there are at least Orlando Brown played a premium position. Roquan Smith is sort of playing that, and it's instructive for Chiefs fans, right? When you take a non-premium player in the top 10, you are making two decisions. You're making the decision to forego drafting the left tackle, the wide receiver, the quarterback, etc. But you're also making the decision, like this is a best case scenario, right? If you draft Patrick Queen and he sucks, he's gone, right? But you fail the draft pick. If you draft Roquan Smith and he's great, you also have to come to this fork in the road, which is that like he's, you already are paying him. He's a top 20 paid linebacker right now.
Yeah, $9 million plus
on his rookie deal. And then you got to pay him top end money when he's actually good because he's been good.
Throw in, do you know who the most expensive player is for the Bears next year based on cap hit?
I don't know,
it's got to be something funny. Like, is it Robert Quinn?
It's Khalil Mack at $24 million of dead cap hit. Do you know who the sixth most expensive player is for the
Byron
Bears?
Pringle.
Nick Foles. Their dead cap money totals $57 million to $58 million. $58 million. Yeah. $5 million for Eddie Goldman. Andy Dalton still counting $5 million. $4.7 million for Jimmy Graham. That team's got some big issues when it comes to the cap. You can see why they're trying to reset that as they move along. Kareem Hunt set out 2 practices, Jeff, and said he wanted to be traded. And they said no. And he immediately came back. Guess who needed a paycheck? I think it was Kareem Hunt. Roquan Smith, it looks like, I think, is going to get traded. Kareem Hunt, Brown said no chance. Would the Browns be better off just cutting bait and moving forward? Or, is this, one more year at $6 million with Kareem Hunt? Is this actually a good decision? And are you surprised that Kareem Hunt didn't hold his ground at all?
Well, I don't know what kind of leverage he had. I mean, it's like Kevin Durant in the NBA. It's like once you're locked in, you can't just talk your way out of town or gripe your way out of town. You have to hope there's some kind of reason for them to make that kind of move. And the Browns, since Kareem Hunt's been there, they've always liked the idea of having him in tandem with Nick Chubb, who he's had an injury history, and Hunt gives them great depth. I don't know why they don't use him more. I've always felt as if he's underutilized within that offense because of the things he can do, especially in the passing game. But yeah, I would not deal him given what they're trying to do right now, especially with the obvious potential of Deshaun Watson being suspended for a year. If you're going Jacoby Brissett, you better have every weapon you possibly could have in that offense at your disposal.
And Eric, doesn't it show that nobody takes him serious in Cleveland either, because they're not worried about him being a malcontent in the locker room? It's not like everyone will be like, oh, okay, whatever, Kareem. Like he can be there and be grumpy and they don't see it as a problem, or Cleveland just doesn't understand anything. Maybe that could be the case.
This also brings us back to the first thing we talked about on the show, which is when a player has violence against women and the NFL kind of doesn't do that much, right? Like, I think it's kind of rich that Kareem Hunt is unhappy with the team, with the only team that gave him a chance after he was on video kicking a woman, right? Like, these are things that these things are all connected, right? When the NFL shows an inconsistent and
right,
I guess sloppy, approach to curbing violence against women, this is the kind of stuff you get, right? So I do think, and even you have Chiefs fans who are like, oh, we should get Kareem Hunt back. It's like, do we remember why Kareem Hunt left in the first place, folks? Like this is why when folks are saying, oh, what's the big deal? Just let him play football, all this kind. And there aren't that many people that are saying that. I'm just saying, when people say that, come back to this thing, Kareem Hunt thing, where you're like, the guy should be lucky. The guy should feel lucky he's even in the league. And now we have, this issue. The Browns are interesting here because they paid Kareem Hunt a decent salary. They paid Nick Chubb kind of like that second tier running back contract. And because like Nick Chubb might be the best runner in all of football. Let's be honest there. But then they gave D'Ernest Johnson a contract. They drafted Demetric Felton. There is like a path. And I said this on the pre-FF forecast that I think Kareem Hunt could just have been cut because of the way that it's all constructed. But now that they have Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, he's kind of going to play that Nyheim Hines role that the Colts had when they were deficient at quarterback with Brissett, where you have kind of the Haas running back in that year it was Marlon Mack, and then you have this sort of secondary kind of running back who plays third downs and is very efficient catching the ball and stuff. They need that because they're not going to, like, Brissett's not going to push the ball downfield. Brissett is not a backup quarterback who is wild. He's a backup quarterback who is safe. And I think, Kareem Hunt is essential for an offense like that.
Let's turn our attention to what's going on in Pittsburgh at the quarterback spot. Should Steeler fans be happy or sad, Jeff, that Mitch Trubisky appears to be leading the quarterback duel?
I think you're happy because it gives Kenny Pickett time to develop and grow. It sounds funny saying that about a kid who played 50-some games or 48 games in college. But I like some things about Mitch Trubisky that can work in Pittsburgh. I like the idea of Pittsburgh getting back to a more conservative offensive approach. I think Trubisky's legs will give them a dimension that they haven't had in that offense since Roethlisberger was a younger quarterback. And I think it's the best possible scenario. I'm always in favor of quarterbacks having a year to sit and learn and get their feet under them and throwing them into the fire and look what happened to every quarterback who played this year. Like, no one really killed it. I mean, Davis, what's the kid at Houston? I want to say he's called him Davis Love. What was this? What's
Davis Mills?
Davis Mills. Davis Mills was the best of the bunch. And everybody else struggled. So why put that on the quarterback when you look at what happened to Patrick Mahomes when he sat? Look what happened to Aaron Rodgers when he sat. Look what happened with Phillip Rivers when he sat. You can go up and down the line. Look at what the Niners are hoping happens with Trey Lance as he sits there. I think there's value in that. So I think this was the scenario the Pittsburgh Steelers hoped for when they signed Trubisky. And it gives them, again, a lot more time to let Pickett find himself and be more effective next season.
You like Pickett in the apprenticeship role and then get it? Or is this a sign if Trubisky's beating him out that, he's as bad as other teams thought he was?
No, they signed Trubisky to start this year. Like, this is a very Alex Smith kind of like year for Trubisky. Mac Jones was the best of the rookies last year. He beat out Cam Newton. Like, I think they were very prepared to play Cam Newton last year, and then Mac Jones was just that good. But to Jeff's point, there's risk to that, right? Because you play if you come in and the offense has to put kid gloves around the thing for you to succeed, a la Mac Jones last year, then what happens? You get Josh McDaniels goes and becomes a head coach, and now you're stuck with Matt Patricia calling plays, and that's a problem. I do like the one thing, and again, Mahomes is a unicorn, so whatever. But I do like this idea. Andy took the offense and ran the offense he wanted to run with Pat, with Alex Smith, tested it out. Patrick got to see it happen, and then he goes and plays, and it's without skipping a beat. When you play a rookie quarterback, you have to put kid gloves on the offense, and oftentimes people see success in that arena as a sign that the guy could be. And so you get this like upsetting the apple cart thing. The issue is right now that the incentives are in the NFL to not develop quarterbacks because of the fifth-year option. Like you look at Jordan Love, it's a far different situation than it was with Rodgers. Rodgers had a 5-year deal with $7 million, no fifth-year option, et cetera, et cetera. The Packers could take 3 years because they still had him team control for 2. Like Jordan Love, like the Packers have to make the 5th-year option decision on him after this season. And it's going to be based, unless Rodgers gets hurt, on almost nothing other than what they've seen internally and that kind of thing. That's where I think it gets hard and where I somewhat disagree with what Jeff is saying. I think when they're ready, you have to play them. But I agree that when you play them, it's not ideal in most cases.
And you're also talking about, sorry to cut you off, Soren, but you're also talking about a roster that's filled with a lot of young players. Like almost every skilled player around this guy is either second or third year, and so it's some rookies. And so you're talking about Najee Harris, you're talking about Deontay Johnson, you're talking about Chase Claypool, Pat Freiermuth. So I think you want those guys to benefit too from having a quarterback who can help them do things as opposed to one who might be running around making mistakes left and right.
Yeah, I think Trubisky's going to be good enough to find out about some players, right? The best part about Alex Smith's tenure in Kansas City was he was good enough for us to figure out that Travis Kelce was a star. He was good enough for us to figure out Tyreek Hill was a star. If Mitch Trubisky is good enough for everybody to find out how good George Pickens is, how whether Deontay Johnson's a superstar quarterback, and if Ben Roethlisberger, like if he can answer questions while Pickett's not taking the hits, then that's a perfect bridge quarterback. If he's Chad Henne in Jacksonville, or he's I'm trying to think of these other ones. If he's Sam Bradford in Arizona, and you got to throw Josh Rosen out there after 3 games because Sam can't move, that's the problem, right? Like I think Trubisky is kind of like just good enough for it to be okay. That's where I'm okay. Whereas there have been some really bad bridge quarterbacks. I don't think Trubisky is in that like so bad that you can't win with him ilk. And like frankly, I think he's on the 1-year deal. Like I also think that as long as they're committed to starting Pickett no matter what next year, the same way that the Chiefs evidently were with Smith, in 17 and 18, then it's fine, I think.
Let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys. Where should the level of concern be? They've got questions. Michael Gallup's hurt at wideout. They moved on from one of their best wideouts for the last number of years. Where should the level of concern, Jeff, be for Cowboy fans when it comes to that offense and in particular the receiving core?
Super high. I mean, ridiculously high. I mean, I like Dak Prescott. I like the way he's played the last couple of years, but he played at that level because he had a lot of good people around him. And when you remove Amari Cooper, you remove Wilson, James Washington goes down, Michael Gallup's coming back from an ACL. CeeDee Lamb is not enough. They need more help around him. And so you're going to see, it'll be curious to see if they lean more into Tony Pollard being a bigger part of this offense than they did last year when they were trying to make sure Zeke got his touches and backed up his big contract. Because I just don't know how this offense, how Dak Prescott is going to function without people who can really make a difference for him down the field. And if you can take away CeeDee Lamb, I just don't see where they get the big plays, the consistency. I know Amari had a down year last year, but you saw the way he played, the way Dak performed when he was playing at a high level. Their defense is going to be great. They got a lot of things over there to like, but to win games in this league, especially in that conference with the quarterbacks you got to play against, your quarterback's got to play at a high level. And I just don't see him doing that without better receivers around him.
That makes it kind of hard to understand why he got the contract he got if he's got to be dripping in wide receivers, doesn't it? I mean, that kind of speaks to, not to go back to a conversation we've had a number of times, but if you got to completely prop the guy up, and I mean, I get it. You invest your money in the quarterback. You want to make him. I'm all for putting weapons around any quarterback, right? I'm certainly not, chastising the Cowboys for trying to do that. But I mean, this is the time to shine, right? Like the expectation is in Kansas City, they went bargain basement and replacing Tyreek Hill. So that Patrick Mahomes is going to carry the freight. It should be similar since the contract number is similar in Dallas, shouldn't it, Eric?
Yeah. I mean, like, that's why he's in the tier that I have with Stafford, right? Like, where I think with Dak, it's sort of, you can plop him onto a great team. It's going to be hard to build around him.
Is that exasperation, Jeff?
No. It's just
like I like
position.
Prescott. I think Prescott's like, I would have given Prescott the money. That's like where I'm at. But I think he's in that tier below where I think he can win a Super Bowl, but I don't think year to year it's going to be touchy. Like last year, Dak Prescott was maybe the best quarterback in the NFL through 5 weeks. And Kellen Moore, like, they were 500 yards a game. They were going to New England, crushing that. They were putting up tons of yards. They were beating good teams. And Dak was the best. Like, Dak was amazing. He was amazing on opening night. He was, and this was all with like a shoulder that I think a lot of people had questions about. He injures the calf and he's not the same the rest of the year, right? Like, it's a little bit. So so one hand, I think if he's healthy this year, he could still be good. They have Dalton Schultz is a great tight end. Like, Dalton Schultz is a top 6 tight end in the NFL. CeeDee Lamb, I think, like, I have bets on CeeDee Lamb to lead the league in receiving. Like, CeeDee Lamb has top 10, top 5 NFL wide receiver potential. You get Gallup back. You have, Tony Pollard in the backfield averaging 5.5 yards a carry last year. You have a good offensive line. To Jeff's point, you have an attack style defense, which I think could go up either direction. I think very good like last year, or fall apart because it's a variance league. What they need, and unfortunately they don't have, and I think this might be something that they have to trade for. They just need a guy who can take the top off the defense in like a Deshaun Jackson kind of way. OBJ could be a possibility, although their money for them might be hard. They need a field stretcher because right now they kind of remind me of those old New England offenses, like the one that Rex Ryan's Jets shut down because they're so good in between the hash marks, but they can't stretch the field defense, on offense after they, that Patriots team traded Moss to the Vikings, and then, they were great, but then there were defensive shells that could stop them. I think that's kind of where Dallas is right now. Like, I think Dallas is going to be fine. I think Kellen Moore is a great play caller. I think Dak's a great quarterback, but I think they need a field stretcher if they're going to be a Super Bowl contender.
I think, by the way, you said last year with Dak. You mean 2 years ago when he was bombs?
No.
Away?
Did you not watch the first part of the season last year?
The opener, 403, 3-1, he was, and then 237, 0-1, 238, 3-0, 188, 4-0. I mean, you're saying 500 a game. I think you're kind of blending. 2 years ago, he was 286, 450, 472, 502, and was blowing it up. In another game, had 166 yards and got hurt. I think you're kind of blending the best of the last 2 years together.
I mean, the offense had 450. I mean, the offense led the league in scoring last year, Petro.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he wasn't productive.
and that was with the Chiefs broke Dak in that game. Like, that was with that bunk ass Chiefs defense, like holding them to 9 points. Like, I don't know. Like, I think Kellen Moore is good. Kellen Moore took freaking Cooper Rush to Minnesota and won on a Sunday night game. He's a good play caller. I think McCarthy's considered a boob when in fact I think he's a top half of the league coach at worst. He has his moments, of course, but I think he's a good coach. They brought Anthony, like, their defense is Anthony Barr, Micah Parsons, Jaron Kearse. They have like movable pieces. Dan Quinn's a pretty good play caller. I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to be fine. Can they win? And here's the other thing. This isn't the AFC, right? Tampa's has shown weaknesses injury-wise in the spring and the fall. The Packers are running Sammy Watkins out there at wide receiver right now. And then, you have the Rams, Stafford's elbow. I mean, Jeff knows, as being a Detroit guy, like, Stafford's elbow could blow up at any time. Like, this isn't the AFC, right? Like, Dallas is a real contender if they get lucky, I think.
All right, let's move over to the Lions. Jeff Chadiha's Lions. The level of the level of optimism. Hard Knocks is creating a buzz for the Lions.
Petro, come on. I created the buzz. I restored the roar all off season, and now everybody's figuring it out. But
I guess that's my question. I mean, are they like, if anybody watched the first episode, we played a montage of some of his, I don't care if you got one cheek and three fingers, we're going to kick your ass. I mean, it's word vomit.
It'd be pretty easy to kick somebody's ass with one cheek and three fingers, wouldn't it?
What came out was, I don't care if you got one cheek and three fingers, I'm going to kick your ass. I thought it was like, it's just filler. Like it's a guy who doesn't have the answer. That's what you do.
But what else is a head coach supposed to do, Petro?
Have the answer. Say something intelligent. Tell your guy how to play better, right? Give him
They play hard for him. Oh. The 2021 Detroit Lions scored the most points in the NFL last year when their win probability was under 1%. This team had no
That's a great stat,
talent
isn't it?
last year. They had no talent, and they played hard. They covered the spread in 11 of 17 games. They got Jamal Williams crying on the field because he loves Dan Campbell so much. The point, Dan Campbell, that after after Dan Campbell took over play calling last year and again, God bless his heart, but Anthony Lynn, again, taking another offense. After Dan Campbell's meathead ass took over play calling for that team, Jared Goff had 11 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. If Tua did that, you would start him over Mahomes in a stream on your fantasy team. Again, he's not Andy Reid. He's not John Harbaugh. He's not Mike Tomlin. I get that. But if you're a head coach that doesn't call plays, all you have to do is motivate your team and do the right stuff on fourth down. And Dan Campbell did that stuff last year. That team had no talent. You come back. Have you seen the players on this team? They got 3 first-round picks on the O-line. They have a tight end who was picked in the top 10. They have DJ Chark, who has been, as a 1,000-yard receiver in this NFL. Amon-Ra St. Brown's good. Jamison Williams is a top 12 pick. On defense, they have Charles Harris, who was a first-round pick who played actually pretty well for that team last year. Aiden Hutchinson, Jeff Okudah. Like this team, and they had the second easiest schedule in the NFL. This is an easy.
I love how I threw out Jeff Okudah, who has a torn Achilles last year.
He looked great.
Eric, listen, Woody Hayes started laughing at you when you quoted that. They had with a less than 1% chance of win. They
play hard.
When they were getting their ass kicked.
They're getting their ass handed to them. The worst part is their ass had already been handed to them. Quite noble. You know who they are? Did you ever see Monty Python and the Holy Grail?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the Black Knight with no arms and no legs, who's nobly just bleeding all over.
And then they got arms and legs this offseason. They got arms and legs. And I know Aiden Hutchinson's arms are small, but they got arms and legs this offseason, Petro.
We're going to find out. To do what? What are they going to do? What are they going to do? 14-3?
No, they 8 or 9 wins. This is the NFC. I call it the NFCS.
Yeah.
Petro.
Listen, this is what this is, Jeff, is the gamblers and the fantasy mindset. It's like they cover for me so they're good when they're really not.
Okay.
The dark side.
Indulge me for a second. This team plays the Commanders at home. This team plays the Seahawks at home. This team plays Matt Patricia and Joe Judge calling plays for the Patriots. This team plays the Dolphins and Tua's bunk ass at home. They play the Chicago Bears twice. They play the New York Football Giants. They play the Jaguars. They play the Vikings twice, which that's 1 win already. They play the Jets. They play the Panthers. Look, if they're in the AFC with a normal AFC schedule, this is a 5-win team. In the NFC, this is an 8-win team.
Give the guy from Michigan 5 seconds. Okay, Jeff, come on.
Well, you know what? Look, I was at their camp last week, and I will say that there is something to them that you cannot see from afar. You actually have to be there on the premises, around the team, and the way they practiced. Now, I watched the first 5 minutes of the show, Hard Knocks, before I came on, and so what they were showing, the hitting and the pushing, that was the practice that I was at. And so it was one of the more physical practices I've seen in the NFL and a training camp in a long time. And they do have an attitude about them that it's like a street game. Like they just think they can win whatever fight they get into. They play with that they practice with that kind of grit. That's the word that he was throwing around. Now, I'm not going to go all out to where Eric is on being super excited about him, but they got a lot of assistant coaches that I covered when they were playing, guys like Deuce Staley and Aaron Glenn and Antoine Randall L. And even they are in practice getting after it with each other. And so the talent needs to develop. There is some promise there, but what will get them over is the fact that they actually won some games down the stretch last year. They won, 3 of their games? All 3 of their wins came in the last 6 weeks of the season. So I think when you go through that kind of adversity, you lose 10 straight games and you find a way to get some wins late with a young team, that can help you a lot. You're in a division that's going to be mediocre. Okay. And Eric said, you got a lot of teams that you can beat on that schedule, like the Jets, the Panthers,
who are
Seahawks,
all going. We got the
Bears.
Lions. Of course, here's the Lions.
Well, okay, you got the Jets, the Seahawks, the Panthers, and the Bears twice, the Vikings twice. You can probably get 6-7 wins out of that.
Week 18 when they if you're betting the
win total,
betting the win total over 6.5.
Oh my God.
It's already pushed. It's the eager bump already.
This is my whole point. This whole conversation is about they're going to win 7 games or more. That's what this is.
That's right.
Going from 3 to 7. Going from 3 to 7 it's a wart on the ass of the league, Eric. Who cares?
I bet them 4-1 to make the playoffs, Petro.
Listen, it's not preposterous.
Petro, name 7 good NFC teams.
I'm with you.
Challenge. Name 7 good NFC teams.
For all those reasons. I am not knocking the bet, but all your hype and bluster is about winning bets, which are clearing like 3-foot high bars, right? Like they're not about setting world records.
The Bengals had to win 7 games before they won 10, and before they went into Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs for the second time in a month. Like you have to start somewhere, Petro.
Yes, the Lions might back ass into some 10-7 record and into the playoffs as some of the commercial.
And I will be obnoxious when they do.
No, listen, I'm not even. You won't be obnoxious because I'm not saying it can't happen.
A whole new podcast.
I'm not saying it can't happen, but there's no Joe Burrow that's going to carry them on into the Super Bowl.
Petro, you talk about touchdown interception ratio. Jared Goff last season, 67.2% completion, 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Those are numbers that would make Tua Tagovailoa blush.
They're the numbers he had last year.
Yeah, and he played with Frank Ragnow was hurt all year. Taylor Decker was hurt all year. Amon-Ra St. Brown, something called Amon-Ra St. Brown was his best receiver, and he was throwing to Josh Reynolds, a guy that was cut mid-season.
I am not going to allow the integrity of this podcast to deteriorate into a shouting match about Tua Tagovailoa versus Jared Goff. I mean, what are we arguing?
This is our NFL podcast. We will not besmirch the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast where quarterback standards are clearly higher. But we are talking about the entire NFL. And in the NFC, or as I call it, the NFCS, Jared Goff is a playoff caliber quarterback.
Okay, so they might back ass into a playoff this year. Do they win the NFC North anytime in the near future?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Oh, give me indulge me for 2 minutes. Aaron Rodgers is going to play for how many more years?
Irrelevant.
No, it's not.
Sure it is.
The Bears are the worst team in the NFL.
So
throw them out. They're a year behind the Lions.
You know who you called the worst team in the NFL going into last year?
The Lions.
The Philadelphia Eagles.
I did. That's true. No. I made a bet that they would have the worst record at like 20-1. That was a good bet, in my opinion. But yes, I've been wrong.
I listen. I'm the only guy who listens to all this crap.
Right? I know. We've all been wrong before.
Yeah.
I also said Washington was not a playoff team when every person was blowing them up.
I have acknowledged you're right. They could be this year's Eagle, which is irrelevant towards winning championships.
But we're not. We're not talking. The whole question wasn't whether or not – I mean, this team hasn't won a playoff game since 1991.
Yeah.
I was 5 years old. Their last home playoff game, whether
I'm
they
aware
won
of
or
all
not,
these numbers.
was Brett Favre's first career playoff game.
I'm aware of all
We're
these
talking
numbers.
about baby steps with these Lions.
I'm aware of all these numbers. I am. And that's my point is you are screaming at the top of your lungs about baby steps. You're talking
football,
You're
baby.
talking about winning an Olympic gold medal in the 100-meter dash, winning
wild card
championships,
spots.
and you are excited because somebody made a poo-poo. Okay? That's what's going on here. Little bitty baby steps like that. Calm down. Just calm down. I want to end with the Ravens. You guys are both at Ravens camp. I think everybody would agree they're one of the smarter organizations out there. Maybe they're not as bright as the beloved Lions, shining star of success now in this new NFL. Takeaways from the Ravens, Jeff. What do you take away from the Ravens?
Well, first I took away that Eric is the coolest guy on the planet because he was wearing it was 105-degree heat index. And he was wearing a button-down, long-sleeve shirt and jeans.
I was not expecting
the
to
only
go to
guy on the
practice.
premises.
I was just trying
not
to
wearing
product.
shorts.
What do you expect from the math nerd, Jeff?
Yeah. And so, look, if they can stay healthy, and Marlon Humphrey left that practice we were at early. Marcus Peters is not practicing yet, still coming back from that ACL. They can stay healthy. I like them in that division a lot just because I like Mike McDonald, the new coordinator, coming back from Michigan. I think he's a really bright defensive mind, probably be a head coach in a few years in this league. They got a ton of talent in the secondary, probably the best secondary in the league. If all those guys are healthy with Humphrey, Peters, Kyle Fuller's there as a third corner with all those safeties with Chuck Clark and Tony Jefferson and Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams. So they will be disruptive. And if Lamar Jackson can be Lamar Jackson again, and with Deshaun Watson sitting down in Cleveland, this division just went from being really close to being what the AFC West has to being a division that's going to be a two-team race. And I think the Ravens get back into it as long as they stay healthy.
Yeah. Interesting, to say the very least. Your takeaway, Eric, from what you saw?
Yeah, I think, to Jeff's point, the tables turned a little bit. The Ravens were fourth place team in that division. They have a fourth place schedule now. Here's the last 8 games for the Bengals. At Steelers, at Titans, Chiefs at home, Browns at home, at Bucks, at Patriots, Bills at home, Ravens at home. I think the Ravens could just stay the same and get better, record-wise. And I think the Bengals they could get better and get worse record-wise, right? Just because of the way the schedules are turning over. My big takeaway from just watching it, and all the things about the Ravens are true, right? They're very smart. They're very process-oriented. They have great coaches. They have, I got to talk to John. I mean, the guy's just, very affable, very data-driven, very, process-oriented. The one concern I have for them is the wide receiver. I just don't know if you can have good, sustainable offense through just your tight ends. And I think Andrews, played at times last year about as well as Travis Kelce did, about as well as Kittle did. Isaiah Likely, somebody that they love out of Coastal Carolina. The running backs are all going to be good. They brought in Mike Davis to go along with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and those guys. Lamar looks healthy, which is the last 2 years, I think, with COVID and injuries and all that stuff. He wasn't. They have to have a player or two that can win on the outside. And right now, it's James Prochet, who had a good career at SMU but hasn't been much in the NFL. Devin Duvernay as well. Good career at Texas, but nothing really special. And then Rashad Bateman's the one where I saw a few drops out of him on the other day. And they need a wide receiver to step up and play well for them, for that offense to round into form and be sort of a Super Bowl caliber offense.
How much was the Lamar Jackson contract? Is that water under the bridge and nobody's worrying about it, Jeff?
It's basically don't talk about it, don't bring it up. And so they're at that point. I spent some time with Eric DeCosta, and I think they're just sort of trying to figure it out. I think it's.
Do you get a sense that they'll figure it out?
We didn't talk much about it. He didn't want to talk about it. And Lamar actually, I think Sirius XM Radio was there doing a big thing with Lamar. They were like, I was told that you bring it up with him, he's cutting the interview, it's ending. And so, yeah, I think both sides are like, we're not talking about it anymore. But again, I feel like eventually he's going to get his money. Like, he's their entire offense. He's their whole team pretty much. And the quarterback market's crazy. So,
and I get the fatigue and not wanting to talk about it, but I mean, how do you read that? Do you read that they're close and they just don't want to piss each other off and like it's delicate times, let's finish this thing off? Or do you read it as they're far apart and they're both pissed at each other, and so they can't possibly talk about the other side without maybe saying something that'll be inflammatory? I mean, I think there's two ways to read that unwillingness.
Yeah, well, I read it more as that they want to be respectful of each other, that they want to make it work, that they don't think it's going to help anybody to talk about it, potentially say anything that could upset the apple cart. And look, we saw this with Orlando Brown here. Without having an agent involved to be a buffer in this stuff, it's very hard to sit in that room and be privy to conversations about your play, how an organization values you, what they worry about, and not take it personally. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's 25 years old. There's no way anybody can sit in that room at that age and be told you're not going to be the greatest thing ever, and here's all the money in the world for you. And if they're not hearing that, it's going to be hard for them to get deals done.
Let me ask you this. If it wraps up right now with Lamar Jackson, right? If they get sideways and this is his last year there and they trade him, they walk away, what have you. Has it been a successful run in Baltimore, Eric?
Yeah.
It is?
Yeah. I mean, they were
one playoff win?
Yeah. I mean, but the prior, so 2000 and so they won the Super Bowl in 12 from 13.
I know the past history, but will there be a success, right? Like the success is based upon his time there.
Hey,
Jeff,
they were about to fire John Harbaugh. Remember when he got that job?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say yes. The context of it is you're in a conference where Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, like you're clearly, so if we're willing to accept the fact that Lamar Jackson's a tier below the great quarterbacks in the AFC, I like they've been under, like they lost when they lost as a favorite once, and every other game they've either won as a favorite or lost as an underdog in the playoffs, right? So I think it's a success, but you're right. I mean, it's tough. Like the bar is pretty high, right? For a team like the Ravens, we all laud for being amazing, smart, great process and everything. They're still getting beat by Kansas City, Buffalo, those teams. Even the Bengals come up and snipe them this year. So I agree. I think so. I think the answer is yes, but it's not overwhelmingly so.
All right, that's going to do it, guys. Great stuff here. We appreciate the time. We appreciate all the comments from everybody. If you're catching us via the podcast, remember you can be a part of the conversation when we stream it live. Should be on Thursdays. We're going to be getting back to, we believe, although there's some discussion there. We'll talk about that maybe later on, but we should be back each week with the 2D podcast starting next week. So for Jeff Chadiha from NFL Network, NFL.com, Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus, PFF.com. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. You can catch my show at 810WHB.com. We say thank you very much for joining us here on the 2D